Imagine the enormous camouflage nets spread over entire aircraft factories. To protect production, artists and architects designed vast fabric sheets that, from above, looked like quiet residential neighborhoods, with small painted houses, plastic trees, and green gardens. Aircraft flying high in the sky saw only a peaceful rural landscape, while beneath these fabrics, in a muted light, thousands of people worked quietly and in perfect order. The thought of entire cities that are essentially delicate paintings on canvas can evoke a feeling of creativity and deep tranquility. During the war, highly advanced methods for weather forecasting were developed, critical for every military maneuver. Meteorologists sat in isolated rooms, listening to the sounds of instruments and tracking the movement of clouds and winds over the Atlantic Ocean. They sought windows of silence, those few hours when the sea calmed and the skies cleared. This waiting for nature's perfect moment, when the entire war depended on the movement of a cloud or a change in barometric pressure, highlights how everything was subject to the slow, unchanging rhythm of the Earth. Operation Bodyguard was one of history's greatest deceptions, based on an entire army of shadows. Whole units of tanks and trucks were created from inflatable rubber. On quiet nights, soldiers would gently inflate these vehicles and arrange them in open fields to deceive reconnaissance aircraft. From a distance, it looked like a vast and powerful army, but up close, it was merely the whisper of air inside large balloons, a triumph of imagination and silence over physical force. The logistics of the war was a masterful exercise in order and organization. Millions of tons of equipment were moved from place to place in supply chains stretching thousands of kilometers. Imagine the ports at night, with cranes moving in slow, sweeping motions, transferring fragrant wooden crates filled with food, clothing, and letters. This movement, like the circulatory system of the world, proceeded at a steady pace, day and night, creating a sense of a large, well-oiled machine working silently to ensure that every person, in the farthest corner of the world, had what they needed. In the realm of communication, complex encryption machines like the Enigma were used. These machines were works of art, composed of small metallic gears that rotated with delicate clicks. The decoders at Bletchley Park sat in quiet rooms, surrounded by papers and thoughts, listening to the rapid sounds of the coding. Their work was like solving an endless crossword puzzle, a sequence of letters transforming into words, and secrets whispered through the cold iron machines in the silence of the British night. Naval battles involved the use of sonar technology, which sent gentle sound waves into the depths of the ocean. Operators sat with large headphones, listening for the rhythmic ping returning from the deep waters. Sometimes, instead, they would hear the songs of whales or the rustle of underwater currents. In this submerged world, everything moved slowly within deep blue, dark waters, and the sounds were muted and echoing, like a dream lying deep beneath the surface. During the Normandy invasion, enormous artificial harbors called mulberry were used. These were colossal concrete blocks manufactured on the English coast and slowly towed by small tugboats across the English Channel. Imagine these heavy structures floating on the quiet morning waters, moving slowly towards their destination. It was magnificent engineering that transformed the coastline, creating an island of stability in the turbulent sea and a safe place for ships to anchor. The convoys in the Atlantic Ocean moved in precise geometric formations. Dozens of merchant ships sailed together, maintaining a constant distance from each other, like a flock of migrating birds over the water. At night, they did not light up to avoid detection, and navigation was done solely by the light of the stars and the reflection of the moon on the waves. The silence in the heart of the ocean, with only the deep, steady hum of the engines accompanying the journey, was mesmerizing and calming for the sailors gazing at the black horizon. On the side of aviation technology, the invention of radar allowed vision beyond the range of human sight. Operators tracked small, green light points flickering on a round screen in dark rooms. The rotating movement of the radar beam was rhythmic and soothing, like a digital hourglass mapping the space. It gave a sense of control and order amidst the uncertainty of the vast skies, a quiet tool that saw what the eye could not perceive. As the war drew to a close, strategic discussions began about building a new and better world. Conferences like Yalta or Potsdam were held in old palaces with thick carpets and high ceilings. Leaders sat around heavy wooden tables, discussing the future of nations and drawing new boundaries of peace. The thought of the slow and meticulous planning of a world without battles, where words replaced weapons, is a calming conclusion to the Great War, a gradual transition from the storm to the quiet of rebuilding. Imagine the vast assembly lines of the Liberator aircraft. In factories like Willow Run, the machines operated in a steady, almost harmonious rhythm. Exactly every hour, a brand new plane would roll off the end of the line. The relative quiet of the factory at night, the soft neon lights, and the cyclical movement of shining metal parts created a ceaseless flow of production. These planes, made of cool, lightweight aluminum, waited in long rows on runways wet with morning dew, ready to soar into the wide, blue skies. During the war, LORAN technology was invented. The foremother of modern GPS ships and planes learned to navigate using long radio waves sent from isolated coastal stations. This navigation was like listening to distant whispers from the horizon. Operators sat with headphones, focusing on delicate frequencies, managing to find their way through thick fog or moonless nights. The ability to know exactly where you are in the heart of the sea, solely through invisible waves traveling through the air, instills a sense of security and peace within the infinite space. One of the most fascinating projects was the construction of the pipeline under the ocean, known as Project Pluto. Engineers laid long, flexible fuel pipes on the seabed, like thin threads of peace connecting England to France. These pipes rested within the cool, dark waters among fish and seaweed, silently transporting energy beneath the churning waves. The thought of this quiet infrastructure, pulsing beneath the water without pause, reminds us of the human capacity to build hidden and stable connections even in difficult times. In North Africa, the war unfolded in the vast stretches of the desert. The dunes shifted constantly in the wind, and the landscape remained clean and pristine. Soldiers had to learn the language of the sand, how to move without leaving a trace, and how to use the stars to avoid getting lost in the golden wilderness. The nights in the desert were extremely cool and quiet, as the sand held the heat of the day and slowly released it into the night air, creating an atmosphere of calm within the absolute silence of the wasteland. On various fronts, enormous observation balloons known as barrage balloons were used. These were large silver or gray balloons, tethered by long steel cables, floating high above cities and ports. On cloudy days, they would disappear into the mist, with only the thin cables betraying their presence. They looked like silent whales swimming in a sea of sky, moving slowly with the wind and keeping watch from above, providing a sense of floating and relaxed protection. The use of war paint on planes and ships was a true art form. Many ships were painted in dazzle style, geometric patterns of black and white that looked like abstract paintings. The goal was not to hide the ship, but to confuse the eye regarding its direction and speed. Watching these ships move against the backdrop of the blue ocean was almost hypnotic. The broken lines blended with the waves and foam, turning heavy iron vessels into floating, swaying works of art. The forests of Europe played a significant role in the war, especially during the cold winters. The thick trees were covered in heavy layers of soft, white snow that swallowed every sound. Inside the woods, soldiers built warm foxholes, covered with fragrant pine branches. The scent of tree resin, combined with the silence of falling snow, created a closed and isolated world. Within the forest, time seemed to stand still, and every movement was slow and calculated, like the slow motion of a winter dream. One of the most soothing facts is about the Red Cross trains. These were trains painted bright white with large red symbols, traveling between countries to transport the wounded and medical supplies. These trains were granted total immunity, moving along the tracks with rhythmic, monotonous clicks. Inside the carriages, there was silence, the scent of cleanliness and devoted care. The slow journey of the train through changing fields and landscapes was, for many, the first moment of true calm after a long time. In the field of intelligence, invisible ink was used. Spies would write messages between the lines of ordinary letters using lemon juice or transparent chemicals. The letter looked perfectly normal, filled with boring daily stories, but when heated gently over a candle, the hidden words would begin to appear in a light brown hue. This process of revealing a secret by the light of a small flame is a slow and quiet ritual, where the mundane becomes something deeper and more meaningful. Toward the end of the war, aerial food drops began, such as Operation Manna. Giant planes flew low over starving cities, dropping thousands of parcels that drifted down slowly on colored parachutes. The sky filled with spots of color descending from the clouds like large, nourishing snowflakes. For the people below, the sight of food falling from the sky in absolute silence was a moment of pure grace, the end of a long era and the beginning of fullness and peace of mind. Imagine daily life inside a submarine, deep beneath the dark blue surface of the ocean. There, in the depths, there is no day and no night. To help the crew maintain a sense of time, the lights inside the submarine would change subtly, a soft red light during the night hours and a dim white light during the day. The silence was absolute, save for the constant, low hum of the electric motors and the rhythmic dripping of water against the steel hull. It felt like floating within a closed, safe space, disconnected from the turbulent world above the waves. During the war, techniques of artificial fog were used. To protect ports and cities from aerial detection, giant machines were positioned to emit clouds of thick white smoke with a scent of oil and steam. This smoke would slowly spread over the water and buildings, wrapping everything in a soft, white blanket that made the world invisible. From the sky, it looked like a sea of quiet clouds, a place where the ground disappears and becomes a soft white dream, providing a sense of total concealment and protection. One of the most sophisticated operations was called Operation Mincemeat, the Major Martin Deception. The British used the body of a man dressed as an officer and allowed it to drift quietly with the ocean currents to the shores of Spain, carrying forged documents. The thought of the slow movement of the waves, carrying with them the most guarded secret of the war to a distant shore, is hypnotic. The sea did its work in silence, current by current, leading the plan to its destination without a soul noticing, until the documents reached the right hands and changed the course of history. The connections between nations were maintained through giant underwater cables resting on the ocean floor. These cables were coated in layers of rubber and metal, transmitting the electrical pulses of Morse code from one side of the world to the other. Imagine the silent depths, where sea creatures glide past these cables through which words of hope, vital commands, and updates from home flow. It is a quiet nervous system for humanity, pulsing within the darkness of the seabed. The use of parachutes in the war was extensive, and they were made of soft, natural silk. The silk was so precious and pleasant that after the parachutes had served their purpose and reached the ground, many women would collect the fabric to sew clothing and wedding dresses. Imagine the smooth white parachutes unfolding in the sky like giant flowers, and then becoming a delicate fabric that touches the skin. This transition from a tool of war to a fabric symbolizing new beginnings and love is a moment of beauty and quiet amidst the storm. On the cold fronts of Russia, soldiers built ice bunkers. They used compressed snow and frozen water to create thick, insulated walls. Inside these bunkers, the temperature remained steady and more pleasant than the freezing exterior. Candlelight would reflect off the ice walls, creating a magical, bluish glow. The silence of the snow outside and the relative warmth within created a bubble of serenity, where the only sound heard was the breathing of the men and the sound of a small fire in the corner. The reconnaissance planes of the war, such as the Mosquito, were made mostly of wood, specifically layers of balsa and birch bonded together. The wood made the planes very light and quiet. When they flew high above the clouds, they left almost no trace on radar. The thought of an aircraft made from the materials of nature, flying swiftly through the cool skies, is a calming thought. It is a blend of human engineering and the raw materials of the forest, moving in smooth, rapid motion through the air. Enormous battleships required immense amounts of fuel, and the process of refueling at sea was a masterpiece of stability. Two giant ships would sail side by side, parallel and just a few meters apart, connected by heavy rubber hoses. The waves would move between them, and they had to maintain a perfect, steady pace to avoid colliding. This movement, like a slow dance of steel giants upon the water, required deep concentration and inner quiet from every sailor on deck. During this war, silk maps were developed for pilots. These were detailed maps printed on small squares of silk so they wouldn't rustle when opened and could be folded into a tiny size to be hidden inside clothing. The silk was not ruined by water and did not tear easily. The touch of the map in the hand was smooth and pleasant, and when opened, it unfolded in total silence, without the sound of tearing paper, showing the way home in the darkness. Imagine the moment the ceasefire was announced. All over the world, radios began to play festive yet quiet music. The sirens, which once signaled danger, fell completely silent. In the big cities, they began to light the street lamps again, one by one, and a soft yellow light returned to fill the sidewalks. People stepped out of their homes, not with shouts, but with a sense of profound relief and a silence that descended upon the world. This silence, marking the end of the war, was the moment everyone could finally close their eyes and sleep in safety. Think of the spectacular precision of the time bombs and mechanical fuses used during the war. These were small, intricate mechanisms, very much like the movements of luxury wristwatches, featuring tiny brass gears and thin steel springs. In the silence of the warehouses, one could hear their rhythmic, metallic ticking. The thought of thousands of small clocks ticking together in perfect unison creates a sense of mesmerizing mechanical order, where every tiny movement of a gear leads to a moment of resolution with profound tranquility. During the war, entire armies relied on beast-of-burden supply lines. In mountainous and snowy regions where trucks could not pass, thousands of mules and horses marched quietly along narrow paths. Imagine the sound of hooves stepping upon damp earth or soft snow, and the heavy, rhythmic breaths of the animals in the cold air. These horses carried food and medical supplies, moving slowly and patiently across vast miles of wild landscape, serving as a silent, living bridge between headquarters and the soldiers at the mountain's peak. One of the most fascinating strategies was the use of ghost cities of light. To deceive bombers at night, the British set up special lighting installations in open fields, far from actual cities. These lights were designed to look from above like faint street lighting or the windows of homes. The thought of a city of lights that exists only to protect, standing silent in the heart of empty fields under the night sky, is a calming image of creative defense. Everything looked so peaceful from above, as if the entire world were slumbering within a halo of soft light. Navigation in the skies was often performed using a sextant and the measurement of stars. Navigators in long-range aircraft would open a small hatch in the roof of the plane, gaze at the North Star or a distant constellation, and calculate their position based on the angle of the light. Inside the dark cockpit, lit only by the faint green glow of the instruments, the practice of astronomy turned the war into a journey among the stars. The thought of a lone aircraft sailing through the infinite darkness, guided only by distant points of light millions of years old, induces a deep internal quiet. In the field of construction, structures known as Quonset huts were established. These were semicircular steel buildings that looked like giant cylinders sliced lengthwise. They were easy to assemble and served as dwellings, hospitals, and offices. Their rounded shape caused the sound of rain to chime like a soft melody of drumming on a metal roof. Inside these huts, soldiers felt enveloped within an iron shell. The sound of water droplets sliding down the curved sides on a gray day created a cozy and protective atmosphere in the heart of the conflict zones. The water supply for troops in the heart of the desert or on isolated islands was sometimes provided by portable distillation units. These devices took salty seawater and turned it into fresh, clear water through a slow process of evaporation and condensation. Imagine the water boiling quietly, the steam rising and cooling, turning into pure droplets that trickle into clean containers. The thought of turning bitter salt into life-giving water is a process of purification and peace, where technology mimics nature's rain cycle to grant life. In the aerial war, pilots used thin strips of aluminum foil dropped from planes to confuse radar. Thousands of glittering metallic pieces would fall slowly through the sky, looking like shimmering snow or a rain of silver. These strips would drift in the wind, swaying gently on their way to the ground. The sight of this silver cloud, floating in absolute silence and filling the sky with delicate sparks, is a mesmerizing visual image that calms the eye and the mind. Many underground fortifications were built with sophisticated ventilation systems that drifted filtered, cool air inside. Within the deep bunkers, the sound of the ventilation was a steady, monotonic hum, a kind of white noise that filled the space. The air was clean and dry, and the scent was of cold metal and stone. In this industrial silence, far from the noise and commotion outside, time was measured only by work shifts. The feeling of being protected under many layers of earth and concrete, within a constant stream of air, instills a profound sense of security. The use of observation balloons in the ocean was very common on the ships that escorted convoys. The balloons were tied to the ship by a long cable and floated at a high altitude to spot submarines from afar. The sailors would look up and see the silent silhouette of the balloon against the blue sky or gray clouds. The balloon would move gently with the motion of the ship, like a personal guardian hovering above. Its appearance, steady and still over the surging waters, gave a sense of a watchful eye and peace of mind to everyone on deck. Toward the end of the war, the use of jeeps began, vehicles that were extraordinarily versatile. The jeep was a small, simple, and rugged vehicle that could travel over any terrain. Imagine a lone jeep driving on a dirt road in the forests of Europe after the rain, its wheels making a soft sound as they press into mud and dry leaves. Its engine ticked in a reliable, steady manner, representing freedom and the ability to reach any place. The slow, slightly bouncy journey through a reawakening nature symbolizes the return to a simple life and free movement in a world returning to itself. Think of the spectacular precision of the time bombs and mechanical fuses used during the war. These were small, intricate mechanisms, very much like the movements of luxury wristwatches, featuring tiny brass gears and thin steel springs. In the silence of the warehouses, one could hear their rhythmic, metallic ticking. The thought of thousands of small clocks ticking together in perfect unison creates a sense of mesmerizing mechanical order, where every tiny movement of a gear leads to a moment of resolution with profound tranquility. During the war, entire armies relied on beast-of-burden supply lines. In mountainous and snowy regions where trucks could not pass, thousands of mules and horses marched quietly along narrow paths. Imagine the sound of hooves stepping upon damp earth or soft snow, and the heavy, rhythmic breaths of the animals in the cold air. These horses carried food and medical supplies, moving slowly and patiently across vast miles of wild landscape, serving as a silent, living bridge between headquarters and the soldiers at the mountain's peak. One of the most fascinating strategies was the use of ghost cities of light. To deceive bombers at night, the British set up special lighting installations in open fields, far from actual cities. These lights were designed to look from above like faint street lighting or the windows of homes. The thought of a city of lights that exists only to protect, standing silent in the heart of empty fields under the night sky, is a calming image of creative defense. Everything looked so peaceful from above, as if the entire world were slumbering within a halo of soft light. Navigation in the skies was often performed using a sextant and the measurement of stars. Navigators in long-range aircraft would open a small hatch in the roof of the plane, gaze at the North Star or a distant constellation, and calculate their position based on the angle of the light. Inside the dark cockpit, lit only by the faint green glow of the instruments, the practice of astronomy turned the war into a journey among the stars. The thought of a lone aircraft sailing through the infinite darkness, guided only by distant points of light millions of years old, induces a deep internal quiet. In the field of construction, structures known as Quonset huts were established. These were semicircular steel buildings that looked like giant cylinders sliced lengthwise. They were easy to assemble and served as dwellings, hospitals, and offices. Their rounded shape caused the sound of rain to chime like a soft melody of drumming on a metal roof. Inside these huts, soldiers felt enveloped within an iron shell. The sound of water droplets sliding down the curved sides on a gray day created a cozy and protective atmosphere in the heart of the conflict zones. The water supply for troops in the heart of the desert or on isolated islands was sometimes provided by portable distillation units. These devices took salty seawater and turned it into fresh, clear water through a slow process of evaporation and condensation. Imagine the water boiling quietly, the steam rising and cooling, turning into pure droplets that trickle into clean containers. The thought of turning bitter salt into life-giving water is a process of purification and peace, where technology mimics nature's rain cycle to grant life. In the aerial war, pilots used thin strips of aluminum foil dropped from planes to confuse radar. Thousands of glittering metallic pieces would fall slowly through the sky, looking like shimmering snow or a rain of silver. These strips would drift in the wind, swaying gently on their way to the ground. The sight of this silver cloud, floating in absolute silence and filling the sky with delicate sparks, is a mesmerizing visual image that calms the eye and the mind. Many underground fortifications were built with sophisticated ventilation systems that drifted filtered, cool air inside. Within the deep bunkers, the sound of the ventilation was a steady, monotonic hum, a kind of white noise that filled the space. The air was clean and dry, and the scent was of cold metal and stone. In this industrial silence, far from the noise and commotion outside, time was measured only by work shifts. The feeling of being protected under many layers of earth and concrete, within a constant stream of air, instills a profound sense of security. The use of observation balloons in the ocean was very common on the ships that escorted convoys. The balloons were tied to the ship by a long cable and floated at a high altitude to spot submarines from afar. The sailors would look up and see the silent silhouette of the balloon against the blue sky or gray clouds. The balloon would move gently with the motion of the ship, like a personal guardian hovering above. Its appearance, steady and still over the surging waters, gave a sense of a watchful eye and peace of mind to everyone on deck. Toward the end of the war, the use of jeeps began, vehicles that were extraordinarily versatile. The jeep was a small, simple, and rugged vehicle that could travel over any terrain. Imagine a lone jeep driving on a dirt road in the forests of Europe after the rain, its wheels making a soft sound as they press into mud and dry leaves. Its engine ticked in a reliable, steady manner, representing freedom and the ability to reach any place. The slow, slightly bouncy journey through a reawakening nature symbolizes the return to a simple life and free movement in a world returning to itself. Imagine the use of glow pigeons, considered for night missions. To allow handlers to identify pigeons returning to the loft in the absolute darkness of the blackout, Their wings were sometimes brushed with a trace of subtle fluorescent paint. As the pigeon approached, it would appear as a soft, floating smudge of light in the black sky, like a tiny, shimmering comet returning home. The silent movement of the wings and the muted glow created a magical and calming sight, a testament to the quiet connection between nature and the human need for secure communication. During the war, field hospitals were developed that were constructed of vast tents with double roofs. This special structure created an insulating layer of air that maintained a pleasant and constant temperature inside, both in the scorching desert and the cold forests. Inside the tent, the light was filtered through the green or white canvas, creating an atmosphere of an eternal, soft afternoon. The sound of the wind caressing the fabric sheets sounded like deep, rhythmic breathing, filling the space with a sense of protection, healing, and absolute rest from the world outside. One of the surprising facts about logistics is the use of portable steel roads. In areas of quagmire like mud or shifting sands, engineers deployed long, flexible metal mats called Marston matting. Imagine the metallic, muffled sound of truck wheels traveling slowly over this net, which unfolds like a stable carpet over the confusion of nature. These mats gave order to the space, a safe and quiet path to cross, and they remained lying there even after the storm passed, a silent sign of the human ability to pave a path of stability anywhere. The giant transport planes, like the Dakota, were known for their ability to fly at very low speeds with exceptional stability. Inside the plane, the vibration of the engines would turn into a monotonic, deep sound that lulled everyone inside to sleep. The plane would float through the air, passing over mountains and sea with ease. Soldiers would lean on their rucksacks, closing their eyes and feeling the small, steady vibrations, as if they were inside a large flying cradle leading them safely to their destination, above the white and quiet clouds. In the field of naval intelligence, special fabric maps were used, printed on small pieces of silk or rayon. Unlike paper, these maps made no noise when opened, and they were so soft that they could be folded into a matchbox or sewn into the lining of a coat. Their touch was cool and smooth, providing navigators with a sense of quiet control. Watching someone gently stretch a silk map over their knees in the darkness, tracing a finger over coastline lines drawn with great precision, is an image of serene and absolute concentration. The siege of large cities sometimes led to the use of underground power stations. To ensure a constant flow of electricity, giant halls were excavated deep within the rock, where massive generators were placed, operating in rhythmic rotations. Their noise within the earth sounded like a distant heartbeat of the planet. Above ground, everything was dark and quiet, but beneath the feet, a steady stream of warm energy ensured that the small lights in hospitals and shelters continued to burn, providing a sense of continuity and security. In the North Atlantic, warships would sometimes become covered in a thick layer of white ice formed from frozen sea spray. The ship would transform into a glittering snow sculpture sailing through the blue-black waters. Sailors would step out onto the deck with small wooden hammers and break the ice with rhythmic taps to lighten the ship's weight. The sound of the ice breaking and falling into the sea, combined with the sight of an entire world painted in white and azure, created a mesmerizing visual silence where every movement seemed slow and calculated within the great cold. The strategy of island hopping in the Pacific included long stays on small, isolated tropical islands. There, soldiers lived amidst powerful nature, the sounds of exotic birds in the morning, the rustling of palm leaves in the night wind, and the sight of orange and pink sunsets melting into the sea. In those moments of respite, the war seemed very far away, and time was measured by the ebb and flow of the tide. Staying in a natural paradise, despite the circumstances, gave people moments of deep contemplation and unexpected inner peace. The use of code lighting between ships was done using large signal lamps with manual shutters. The signaler would open and close the shutters rapidly, sending short and long beams of light toward the horizon. From the other side, miles away, only a tiny yellow flicker appeared in the darkness, like a firefly speaking in a secret language. This quiet conversation of lights over the waves, without the need for words or sounds, created a mysterious and calming connection between ships sailing alone at night. Toward the end of the war, methods were developed to restore damaged landscapes through aerial seeding. Planes would fly low over fields that had suffered damage, dropping millions of tiny seeds of wildflowers and green grass. These seeds would fall silently to the earth, waiting for the first rain to sprout and turn everything green again. The thought of these fields blooming once more, of nature healing itself and flowers covering the marks of the past, is the perfect conclusion to the journey. A return to silence, to growth, and to the peaceful sleep of a world beginning anew. Imagine the widespread use of tiny photographic paper known as V-mail. To save space and weight on mail-carrying aircraft, letters were photographed and shrunk to the size of miniature film. Only upon reaching their destination were they reprinted onto soft, light paper. The thought of millions of words, emotions, and longings compressed into a small roll of transparent film, flying silently over the ocean, is a comforting one. These letters drifted among the clouds inside small metal boxes, carrying with them the silence of great distances until they reached the hands waiting for them. In those years, the first seeds of electronic computers, such as the Colossus, were developed. These massive machines resided in isolated, quiet rooms, composed of thousands of small glass vacuum tubes that emitted a soft, warm, orange glow. The only sound in the room was a low electrical hum and the delicate clicking of switches moving at a steady pace. These machines thought, in absolute silence, solving complex codes while the people around them worked in deep concentration. The flickering light and the heat they radiated created an atmosphere of serene intellectual labor in the heart of the night. To protect ships from magnetic mines, a process called degaussing was used. The ship was surrounded by thick copper cables, and a gentle electric current was passed through them to neutralize the magnetic field of the steel. Imagine the ship standing in still waters as it cleanses itself of its magnetic force. This process turned these metal giants invisible to the mines resting on the seabed. It is a quiet, invisible defense that allows a ship to sail as safely as a cloud over the surface of the deep waters. During the war, advanced inflatable rubber rafts were developed for pilots who had to abandon their aircraft at sea. These boats were equipped with small kits containing signaling mirrors and tins of water. Staying inside a small rubber raft, rocking gently on the infinite waves of the ocean, has something hypnotic about it. The bright yellow color of the boat against the deep blue background of the water, and the rhythmic sound of the waves caressing the rubber sides, created a small, solitary world where time stood still within the silence of the maritime expanse. Think of the underground defense lines, such as the Maginot Line, which were essentially entire cities beneath the earth. Inside these tunnels, the temperature was always constant, and the walls were painted in bright, calming colors. There were small electric trains that traveled quietly on narrow tracks, moving supplies between the bunkers. The noise of the war outside did not penetrate these depths. There reigned an industrial silence, perfect order, and a sense of total isolation from the storm raging above the ground. In the field of maritime navigation, lighted buoys were used to mark safe paths through minefields. These buoys were equipped with small lamps powered by long-range batteries, and they flickered at a slow pace throughout the night. Imagine a convoy of ships traveling slowly between these twinkling points, like walking through a path of stars upon the water. Every flash is a sign of security, a quiet guidance through the darkness that leads the ships to a safe harbor in great tranquility. The first sonar devices used quartz crystals to create sound waves. These crystals, unearthed from the ground, vibrated at frequencies beyond the range of human hearing, sending pulses of energy into the water. The thought of these precious, transparent stones sitting at the heart of maritime technology adds a layer of nature and beauty to the machine. The crystal vibrates silently, the water conducts the sound, and everything happens within the deep hush of hidden blue depths. The use of camouflage smoke in ports sometimes involved special vegetable oils. When the oil was heated, it would turn into white, fragrant vapors that enveloped the ships and the docks. This artificial mist was very soft to the touch, creating the feeling of an eternal misty morning. Inside the fog, all sounds became muffled, the shouts of people, the creaking of cranes, and the sound of the water were swallowed by the white blanket, turning the bustling port into a place of silence and dreams. In tropical regions, soldiers built nipa huts from natural materials like palm leaves and bamboo branches. The roofs were made of thick layers of dry leaves that were waterproof. When the heavy monsoon rains fell, the sound of the water hitting the leaves was soft and pleasant, like a long, continuous whisper. Inside this natural structure, the air was cool and flowing, and the scent of damp vegetation filled the space, inviting those within to close their eyes and surrender to the rhythm of nature. Toward the end of the war, more advanced anesthetics were developed for use in field hospitals. These medicines allowed the wounded to sink into a deep, painless sleep within minutes. Imagine the silence in the hospital corridors at night, with only the light footsteps of nurses heard on the wooden floor, while the patients rest within a world of dreams, protected and cared for. It is a moment of grace and medicine, where the war pauses to allow the body and soul to heal in absolute silence. Here is the translation of these 10 facts into English, maintaining the serene, rhythmic, and gentle tone designed to induce sleep. Imagine the use of exceptionally thin paper for printing newspapers and leaflets dropped from the air. This paper was so light that when thousands of leaflets were released from a high-altitude aircraft, they didn't fall immediately. Instead, they drifted and spiraled in the wind like delicate snowflakes. Watching millions of small white pages cover the sky and slowly descend upon cities and fields creates the sensation of a rain of silent words, covering the earth in a soft layer of information and hope, with no sound other than the faint rustle of paper touching the ground. In the realm of aerial navigation, pilots used a mechanical flight computer called the E6B. It is a circle of metal or plastic with rotating discs, used to calculate wind direction and flight speed. The act of turning the discs was quiet and smooth, requiring deep concentration and delicate hand movements. Inside the cockpit, the faint whirring of the computer blended with the distant hum of the engines, providing the pilot with a sense of mathematical order within the vast, dark expanse of the night sky. Think of the camouflage colors of aircraft designed for high-altitude flights. The underside of the planes was often painted in a shade called sky blue or pale azure, so they would vanish completely from the eyes of someone looking up from the ground. The plane became an inseparable part of the heavens, as if melting into the infinite blue. Its movement through the sky was almost spiritual, a massive metal body becoming transparent and invisible, sailing in silence above the soft, white clouds. The use of sandbags to build fortifications was a monotonous and calming manual labor. Millions of bags made of rugged jute fabric were filled with soft, dry sand and stacked upon one another in perfect order. The touch of the jute, the scent of the earth, and the muffled thud of a bag landing on its fellow created thick, sound-absorbing protective walls. Inside a position surrounded by sandbags, noises from the outside world became very faint, and soldiers could find a moment of quiet within a structure that felt like a warm, protected cave in the heart of nature. On the great warships, enormous gyroscopes were installed to maintain the stability of instruments. A gyroscope is a heavy metal wheel spinning at immense speed within an axis. This rotation created a low, constant whirring sound, a frequency almost inaudible that gently vibrated the ship's floor. This spinning motion provided a sense of balance and security, as if the ship's heart were beating at a steady pace, keeping it upright and stable even when the waves outside were high and stormy. During the war, sophisticated optical lenses were developed for binoculars and telescopes. These lenses were polished by hand for long hours using fine polishing powders and clear water. The result was a glass so perfectly transparent that it allowed one to see across vast distances with stunning clarity. Looking through the cool, clean lens made the distant horizon feel close and accessible, as if one could reach out and touch the trees or the distant sea waves, providing a sense of visual clarity and peace. One fascinating strategy was the use of water noisemakers to deceive sonar. These were small devices dropped into the water that emitted the sounds of ship engines or air bubbles. In the depths, these noisemakers created sound clouds that drew attention away from the actual ships. Imagine the blue water filled with rhythmic, calming sounds, like a mechanical whale song, creating a world of shadows and hidden noises beneath the surface, distracting the mind with quiet sophistication. The logistics of fuel supplies sometimes involved the use of flexible bladders made of thick rubber. These containers looked like giant pillows resting on the ground or on the decks of ships. When full, they were soft and springy to the touch. The thought of thousands of liters of liquid resting within a flexible, protective shell, moving gently with the vibrations of the earth or the sea, has something raw and calming about it. It is a reservoir of quiet energy, waiting patiently for the hour of need within a soft, rounded structure. Inside the radar huts on the coast of England, operators sat in dim rooms before round glass screens. The green radar beam would rotate around the central axis again and again, clearing the screen and painting small points of light upon it. This circular motion, combined with the silence in the room and the scent of warm electrical equipment, was almost hypnotic. It is a quiet monitoring of the sky, an act of patient observation that grants a sense of protection and control over the infinite space surrounding us. Finally, think of the watch-changing ceremonies at bases and on ships. Every few hours, in perfect coordination, one group of people would go to sleep while the second group would wake up. This transition was done in exquisite silence, in whispers and light footsteps, so as not to disturb the rest of others. This fixed order, day after day, created a complete rhythm of life, of cycle and rest. When your shift ended, you could slide into your hammock or warm bed, knowing that someone else was now guarding the world, and allow yourself to sink into a deep and carefree sleep. Imagine the use of wax paper for packaging delicate electronic components sent overseas. The paper was coated with a thin, slippery layer of natural wax, protecting the metal from the ocean's humidity. When these packages were opened, there was a soft, pleasant rustle, and a subtle scent of beeswax filled the space. The touch of the paper was cool and smooth, preserving the polished parts of the machinery in a perfect state, as if they rested within an envelope of silence that time could not touch. During the war, activated carbon air filters were developed for protective masks and shelters. The carbon, made from burnt coconut shells, is a black, porous, and very quiet material. Air passing through the thousands of tiny carbon granules was cleansed of all impurities, turning into clear, cool air. Sitting in a space where the air is filtered this way gives a sense of deep, clean breathing, as if you are in the heart of an ancient forest where nature filters all the world's noise for you. One of the most fascinating facts is the use of manned observation balloons that floated quietly above the front lines. The observer would sit in a light wicker basket, suspended beneath a vast balloon filled with helium gas. At an altitude of hundreds of meters, far from the ground, the silence was absolute. The wind would caress the sides of the balloon, and the basket would sway with great gentleness. From above, the war looked like a small game of toy soldiers, and the observer could gaze at the distant horizon, where the sky kisses the earth in a line of eternal peace. Think of the production lines for the crystal oscillators used inside radios and communication devices. These were natural quartz crystals polished into thin, transparent plates. Each plate vibrated at a very precise frequency when a weak electric current passed through it. Working with these crystals required infinite patience and absolute quiet. The thought of millions of transparent stone hearts pulsing inside the devices, creating invisible frequencies that travel through the air, is a mesmerizing thought that brings calm to the soul. On the naval side, anti-rust paints in a deep reddish-brown hue were developed to paint the hull of the ship below the waterline. The paint was thick and heavy, protecting the steel from the sea salt and small marine creatures. When the ship was anchored in still waters, the red color would reflect in the blue of the sea, creating shades of purple and crimson. This layer was like a second protective skin for the ship, keeping it whole and strong within the cool, dark waters of the depths. The use of ultraviolet navigation lights allowed planes to fly in formation within the darkness without being detected. These lights were invisible to the naked eye, and only pilots wearing special goggles could see a soft, violet glow emanating from the tail of the plane in front of them. Imagine a convoy of giant aircraft sailing through the night sky, connected to one another by hidden threads of dim, violet light. It is a silent dance within the infinite, where sight becomes a magical and mysterious experience of hidden colors. In snowy regions, birchwood skis were used for scout units. The skis were greased with animal fat so they would slide easily over the pristine snow. The only sound to be heard was the soft beat of the wood gliding over the ice flakes. The skier would move in long, rhythmic motions, leaving behind two straight, quiet tracks in the white landscape. This movement is like hovering over the earth, a quiet and clean way to pass through nature without disturbing its silence. In the field of medicine, natural cotton wool bandages were used, vacuum-packed inside small metal cylinders. When the cylinder was opened, the cotton would expand and turn into a soft, white cloud. The touch of the cotton on the skin was caressing and comforting, providing soft protection for injuries. The thought of a material so soft and delicate, kept inside a rigid metal vessel, is an image of care and compassion within a world of iron. The white cotton symbolized the desire to heal and soothe pain with quietness and devotion. Think of the cuckoo clocks and pendulums that were common in European homes at that time. Even during the war, the clocks continued to tick inside the dark houses. The steady, deep tick-tock was a sound of stability. Families would wind the clock every evening, turning the key inside the metallic mechanism and feeling the tension of the spring. This ticking was like the pulse of a home that refuses to stop, a monotonous music that helps one fall asleep knowing that time continues to flow safely toward the morning. Imagine the large weather maps drawn by hand in operations rooms. Forecasters would use soft, colored pencils to draw curved lines of air pressure, which looked like quiet waves across the map. They would mark areas of high pressure in a calming blue color, symbolizing clear skies and a gentle breeze. These maps were the plan for tomorrow's quiet, a glimpse into moments of clearing where nature calms down and allows the whole world to breathe a sigh of relief and sink into rest. Imagine the use of thick cork boards inside map and communication rooms. Cork is a natural, soft, and porous material that absorbs all the sounds of the room, inducing a deep silence. Upon these walls were small pins with colorful plastic heads, marking the movements of ships and aircraft. The act of pressing a pin into the soft cork is a quiet and calming action, where every movement in the great world is translated into a tiny dot of color resting on a silent wall in a protected, hushed command center. During the war, large wooden buoys were manufactured for mooring ships in remote harbors. These buoys were built from massive tree trunks felled in ancient forests, and they floated upon the water, tethered by heavy iron chains to the seabed. At night, when the sea was still, one could hear the slow and deep creaking of the wood moving across the waves, a sound reminiscent of a whale's deep breath. The ships resting beside these buoys felt the slight, steady sway, like a giant cradle rocking to the rhythm of the ocean. Think of the use of solar telescopes in isolated observatories to forecast electromagnetic disturbances. Scientists would gaze at sunspots and magnetic flares erupting from the surface of the distant sun, to know when radio broadcasts would be clear and when they would be filled with static noise. The thought of a person sitting in a dark room, peering at the golden sun through dark lenses, tracking the movement of energy within the solar system, connects the events of the war to the infinite cosmic rhythm and the quiet of the universe. The use of raw wool blankets inside submarines and shelters was essential for maintaining body heat. These blankets were heavy, with a coarse and comforting texture, and they emitted a faint, natural scent of clean wool. When covered by them, the weight of the blanket provided an immediate sense of security, as if the person were wrapped in a firm embrace. Within cool and metallic spaces, this blanket was an island of softness and warmth, allowing the soul to relax and sink into a quiet, protected inner world. In the field of aerial photography, cameras with a spring-loaded mechanism were used, operating without the need for electricity. An operator would wind the spring using a large handle, and the ticking sound of the releasing spring was rhythmic and precise, like an antique clock. The camera would photograph the landscape below every few seconds, creating a sequence of quiet, still images of fields, rivers, and cities. Every photograph was a moment frozen in time, a testament to the peace that exists at high altitudes, above all the commotion of the world. One of the calming facts concerns the cultivation of medicinal plants within the courtyards of military hospitals. Nurses and doctors tended to beds of lavender, mint, and chamomile, using their scents to soothe the patients. The sweet and calming fragrance of the flowers was carried by the breeze, entering through open windows into the clean, white rooms. The combination of precise medical care and the natural, soothing aromas of the garden created a space of compassion and serenity, a place where the body and soul could rest and heal. During the war, protective goggles with polarized lenses, Polaroid, were developed. These lenses filtered out the intense reflections of the sun on the sea or snow, making the view softer and clearer. When a person wore these goggles, the world suddenly seemed calmer, the brilliant white glares turned into soothing grays, and the eyes could relax from the strain. Gazing at a bright horizon through a dark and pleasant filter is a visual experience of calm, where all visual information becomes refined and peaceful. Imagine the use of beeswax to preserve parts of wooden aircraft. Carpenters would apply a thin, fragrant layer of wax to the wing joints to prevent moisture from penetrating. The scent of natural wax within the hangars was warm and sweet, and the touch of the coated wood was incredibly smooth and pleasant. Working with materials from nature to strengthen modern machines created a quiet connection between the world of technology and the ancient resources of the earth, in a process of slow and meticulous construction. The use of small kerosene lamps inside shelters in rural areas created a truly unique atmosphere. The light of a kerosene lamp is warm, orange, and flickers gently, casting soft shadows on the walls. The small sound of combustion, a faint, hushed rustle of the flame consuming the fuel, is one of the most relaxing sounds in existence. Inside the closed room, this small light was the center of the world, a place of togetherness and quiet, where people could sit close to one another and wait for the night to pass in peace. On the side of navigation, navigators sometimes used flow meters based on air bubbles. Inside the device was a small glass tube filled with liquid, containing a single air bubble that moved with the motion of the plane or ship. Watching the small, smooth bubbles slide from side to side within the clear liquid is a hypnotic and calming act. The bubble always strives to find the center, the point of absolute balance, reminding us that even within great movement and storm, there is always an inner center of silence and stability to which one can return.